Hi, Miss Meredith. How are you doing today? Good. Well, my name is Christine. I'm with Occupational Therapy. Today during your session, we're going to do what's called a manual muscle test. And all this is a way for you to find out how much you can move your muscles and how strong they are. At some points throughout this session, I may need to place my hands on you to give you a little bit of support or to help you with some of these motions. Is that going to be okay? Yes. Okay. Well, if at any point throughout this test you experience any pain, please let me know so we can stop immediately. For shoulder flexion, the patient should be comfortably seated in the chair with their feet flat on the floor and their back straight up against the back of the chair. Their arms should be at their side in mid-position. The therapist should stabilize the patient's shoulder just above the scapula and the clavicle. This will ensure that the patient is only using their shoulder to perform flexion and not substituting any other muscles. The primary mover for shoulder flexion is the anterior deltoid. This muscle can be felt by placing your fingers, usually 2 or 3, lightly over the front of the glenohumeral or shoulder joint. A manual muscle test grade of 5 is achieved whenever the therapist places full resistance against the muscle. The patient's arm does not budge and they are able to hold the position without struggling. A manual muscle test grade of 4 is achieved whenever the patient is able to maintain their position when the therapist applies moderate resistance. When the therapist attempts to add full resistance, the patient's arm gives. A manual muscle test grade of 3+ is achieved whenever the patient is able to maintain their position when the therapist applies slight resistance. When the therapist goes to apply over slight resistance, the patient's arm falls immediately. A manual muscle test grade of 3 is achieved whenever the patient is able to move their arm through a full range of motion, but they are unable to take any resistance. When the therapist goes to apply even slight resistance, the patient's arm falls immediately. A manual muscle test grade of 3- is achieved whenever the patient is able to move their arm over 50% of a full range of motion. Because they are unable to achieve full range of motion, resistance is not applied. A manual muscle test grade of 2+ can be achieved in either the against gravity or gravity reduced position. In the against gravity position, this is achieved when the patient is able to move their arm through less than 50% of their full range of motion. Because it is not full range of motion, no resistance is applied. If the patient was unable to achieve a full range of motion in an against gravity position, you would then place them in a gravity-reduced position to see if they can achieve any more motion. The way you would do this is by placing them in a sideline position for shoulder flexion. You would ask the patient to do the same motion that you asked them to do when they were in the against gravity position, but this time I would still be supporting them at their shoulder, but I would also support the weight of their arm. I would then instruct the patient to move their arm as high as they can, up above their head, and if they were able to achieve full range of motion in this position, they would be graded a 2. If the patient was able to achieve a full range of motion in the gravity-reduced position, you would then ask them to come up to about halfway of their full range of motion and you would apply slight resistance. If they're able to take slight resistance, you would grade this in 2+. Halfway? In some cases, the patient still will not be able to achieve full range of motion in a gravity-reduced position. In this case, it would be graded at 2-. As far as you can. The patient was unable to move their arm in both against gravity and reduced gravity position. So now I will check and see if I can detect any muscle activity in their arm for shoulder flexion. Try to move your arm for me. I was able to dislike some detection of muscle activity, so this patient would be graded a 1. The patient was unable to move their arm in both the gravity-reduced and the against gravity positions. I'm now going to see if I can detect any muscle activity by palpating. Can you move your arm for me? I was unable to detect any muscle activity, so the patient would be graded a 0. Don't you know?